What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another edition of the Jays for Days podcast. I'm Josh. He's Josh. We got Jays Jumpers, Jaron Jackson Jr.'s, John Morant's, Joe Johnson's, Ja Raffs, of course. We've got Jays. We got him for days. Josh, how you doing?
Feel like I need to defend the integrity of the charge.
Oh boy. Listen, I only have one cup of coffee here. I mean, you gotta let me know if we're gonna get into situations like this, because we gotta strap in if we're gonna talk about the integrity of the charge.
Have you seen this stuff? People calling for the charge to be removed from the sport?
I have not seen that. That's an interesting decision.
After the Giannis situation and the Ja situation. Both of which, as far as I can tell, now I'm not going to pretend like I actually know what a charge is anymore. They appear to be legitimate charges to me now.
So is the idea being that if there wasn't a charge to try and take, those guys would have just gotten out of the way and neither would have gotten hurt?
Yes.
Okay. So
I think you're going where I'm going with this.
So I don't like at what point is that would be like that's almost as fundamental as saying, you know what? Tom Brady once tore his ACL because he got sacked. We should just take out sacks from football. And no, to be fair, the NFL is coming about as close as they can to removing the sack without actually removing it. But and football is a great sport to bring into a conversation like this, because people want to get mad about how it's not as physical, and then when guys get hurt, turn around because we're not protecting the players enough. Like the NBA game could not be less physical. You couldn't play less physical defense, right? With the rules of playing defense at this point. So you just can't not tell somebody to contest a shot. You just can't, you can't do that. Is what's the alternative? What are we going to do? We're just going to is just getting to the front of the rim going to be 25 times more important than any other skill in basketball because you're not allowed to contest them if they get into the circle? I don't know. That doesn't make any sense.
Zach Harper wrote an article basically saying we need to put some of the other defensive measures back in place at the expense of the charge, which was one suggestion, as in hand checking and those kind of things.
Making physical defense more accessible, right, so that there's less jumping really high and getting to the front of the rim.
And specifically, and if
the momentum
and the weak side charge thing, which I get, and I don't particularly, and these were both examples of it,
that kind of thing, sliding.
Now, I don't think though. Again, I'm not going to pretend like I know what a charge is anymore, but those didn't seem to be two egregious examples where they slid in at the last minute. I watched them back a bunch of times to try and see it. It seemed like they were legit, which is where also, right, there might be, well, there are probably a few things. There aren't many things in basketball that annoy me more than people that just fly toward the rim with no particular plan, which is why this irks me so much.
Man, you must hate Ja. You must not find Ja that talented whatsoever.
Now, if you can make it work, see, he makes it work most of the time, so that's okay. But just generally, and so that's what the charge is there for, is to penalize people for doing that. And yeah, okay, if you want to say the weak side charge, because it's a lot of people just sliding in late, it's rewarding people for playing bad defense. I'm fine with having a conversation about that. But the idea of the charge as a whole, yeah, because a couple people attacked the basket, and it's unfortunate they got hurt. I couldn't believe that this was a real suggestion coming out yesterday, is that we need to get rid of the charge. Because at that point, now, if you want to make some other trades, we can talk about that. But the teams are going to score 150 points a game if you can't slide in and take a charge.
Mm-hmm. It's impossible to stay in front of anybody.
Right.
It's truly impossible.
And it's right. If you have nothing deterring you, basically, from, and one of the other things Zach Harper mentioned was expanding the restricted arc, which I'm also here for that. There are ways that I can be okay with this, but just the fact that we're going after the charge is, as it being my favorite play in the sport, is never going to be okay with me.
Yeah, that's definitely one of those things that, and I'm glad I haven't read Zach Harper's article, and generally I'm a fan of Zach Harper. So hearing you kind of describe some of the things that he's mentioned, I'm less appalled by the idea of
Yeah, it wasn't
that
just a
than
we need to get rid of it's a here's how we could do this better kind
right,
of thing.
right. Because I mean, you're right. It's kind of kind of it's the most effective form of defense right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, like that's probably a pretty fair thing to say. That to just get in the way of the guy who's now jumped up in the air and has no, grounding whatsoever, and so you just stand in front of him and hope that you get the call that you're looking for, because you can't slow them down in any real effective way. Like nobody on the planet can stay in front of John Morant. Nobody on the planet, at least not one-on-one. So it's just.
Yeah, and very rarely do you actually get rewarded for going straight up and down. That's the other part of this.
That's also true.
Right? Everybody, it's contact going toward the rim. It's a defensive foul.
Yeah.
Now, some of them are defensive fouls. I just also see a lot of straight up and down that I feel like shouldn't be called a foul. And I just woke up this morning and started kind of looking around and reading The Athletic, and apparently that's the conversation we're having today: is do we need to remove the charge?
That's an interesting. That wouldn't be on my bingo card of responses from yesterday's. I mean, the injuries would have been on my bingo card, so I guess it's injuries adjacent.
Right.
But but that one's interesting. Do you think? And the Nuggets won last night, so this is now a moot point. But would that have been the first time? Like I wouldn't be surprised if that was the first time ever on a 4-game day of round 1 game ones that all 4 home teams lost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is going to be some playoffs, because those seeds mean absolutely nothing except for a couple situations.
Which is like it's going to be a tough playoffs perhaps for the regular season.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. 100%.
Maybe not in the East, because I still think that, like, as long as, like, I still think that for the most part, like, the Knicks might beat the Cavs, but that's a pretty 6 1/2 dozen series for me.
Yeah, that's the cutoff, right? Because then you've got the Nets, whose wins were, collected by players no longer playing for the team. The Celtics are going to destroy the Hawks.
Mm-hmm.
And then and the Heat don't count because they're clearly the most dangerous team down there. Yeah. But in the West, you're looking, okay, I mean, the Timberwolves aren't the 8th best team in the West if they're healthy. They missed Cat most of the season and are just getting, your favorite, the guy who's better than your point guard kind of acclimated to things. So they're more dangerous than your typical 8 seed. I mean, LeBron's the 7 seed with a healthy Anthony Davis.
And Austin Reeves and
right.
and Rui Hachimura. In the post-game press conference yesterday, Desmond Bane basically said that was Rui, the best game of Rui's life. Let's see if he can do it again on Wednesday. I mean, that was very much LeBron and AD combined for like 37. And then Reeves, Rui, and D'Angelo frickin' Russell combined for 70. Like, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, and then you got the Warriors down there. Yeah, the Kings are the 3 seed.
Did you watch Game 1 of the Kings series?
I watched the end. Mm-hmm.
Okay, you need to watch every second of the rest. You need to watch every second of the rest of the series. That's so good.
That is the series I am locked into 100%. Oh, yeah.
I think the Knicks Cavs is going to be really good for the duration as well. But those two series are going to be, and I suppose, I mean, I need the series to go long at this point in the Grizzlies Lakers. So I'm hoping that one is but I'm hoping. Speaking of those injuries, that perhaps Ja can come back and anywhere close to full strength at least at some point. Okay, college basketball. At some point, I suppose we should. This is not an NBA podcast. It used to be. If you're around from the NBA / college basketball days, you've been around for a while. But college basketball podcast, and at some point we should turn our attention to college basketball. The transfer portal in full swing, Josh. Starting to kind of get an idea of what next year's rosters are going to look like, at least the bulk of them. There are still some really, really good players.
Yeah, the big fish are still out there
For the most part, right? You have a couple of guys that have made their homes already, but just going and looking at some of these transfer rankings, I mean, you'll see 7 or 8 of the top 10, 11, 12 guys still waiting to announce where they're going to play college basketball next season. So still plenty left to go in that sense, but there's been some movement there, and we'll talk about a couple things in the transfer portal. But first, Josh, we have to talk about kind of the most striking news of the last 7 days in the sport, and that's with top 20 recruit and Memphis signee Mikey Williams being involved in an incident in San Diego where he allegedly fired a gun at a group of 5 people in a car that had, according to his lawyer, entered his home uninvited, and things kind of escalated from there. And here's Mikey Williams in the news for reasons that Memphis fans were not hoping leading up to his tenure as a Tiger basketball player.
Yeah. And these situations are always so difficult, obviously coming off the back of what happened with Alabama this season and just not having all of the details here. And you and I think are careful to try not to rush to too much judgment. And my first thing is just concern and sadness in situations like this, because specifically for somebody like him too, where he's kind of the first one who has done this NIL thing from start to finish, right?
Certainly one of them, yeah.
He's kind of the face of, at least on the, if you want to say the Cavender twins are the face of NIL on the women's side, I would argue he's probably the face of NIL on the men's side. He hasn't even played college basketball yet.
Yeah.
Right, but he's already got the endorsement deal. And I saw that he had deactivated his Instagram account, which is a source of income kind of thing.
A big part of why he signed a deal with, I think he's a Puma guy. Is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
Millions of followers.
Right, exactly. It's not just here's me promoting myself on social media, building my brand. It's which tells you kind of where things are at here. And so that's my first, and it's kind of how I felt about Ja Morant too, is and Ja even talked about this, just right, the pressure that comes with all of this stuff. And so I want to be cognizant of that first, that I can't imagine what Mikey Williams' day-to-day life is like and what this has been like for him as he kind of blazes this trail that nobody else has done before. And now he basically gets to the end of it and he's going to go to college, and then this happened. So obviously we need more information. I hope this doesn't ruin everything, because at this point I'm just more concerned about his future and his well-being more than anything else. And thankfully nobody got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And there are certainly questions to be asked here about, right, what exactly uninvited means and how all of that went down in terms of kind of evaluating the situation itself, which obviously we just don't have that information. But yeah, you just hate seeing things like this, and I just wonder what if any role kind of just the realities he was living in as the guy making all of this NIL money before he even went to college. And maybe it's completely unrelated. That's just where my head goes, because I can't imagine living that way day to day. And right, it's not like he's a 5-year NBA veteran who's experienced life as a professional. He's a teenager.
Yeah.
Teenagers aren't supposed to be living that way.
He went from, physics class to a millionaire.
Right.
Overnight.
Exactly. Right.
I think there are a couple of things here. One, I think that's where my head goes first as well, is these unintended consequences that come with that come with a teenager having access to the kind of money that Mikey Williams has access to. I mean, we talk about I mean, we spent this season, parts of this season, talking about John Morant and all the money that he has, and that guy is, 5 years older than Mikey Williams. And Mikey Williams' money is certainly not at the level that John Morant's money is at, but it's also, I'm sure, obscene amounts of money.
And he's got no, I mean, practically speaking, he's got no use for it. You know what I mean? In terms of needing it to pay bills and live day to day at this point.
Right. And just right, there's just pressure and responsibility that I'm sure comes with that. That is generally probably not talked about enough from what that means for the pressure that a high school athlete now is under. And that doesn't, and I don't want that to come off as an excuse, because the other part of this is that we have to be very careful about there are a lot of terms here that I'd love to see defined explicitly.
Yep.
Like, what does uninvited mean? Like, did someone come knocking on the door and then Mikey Williams came to the door and saw who it was and said, "Don't come in my house," and they all came into his house? Because the cut and dry point A to point B description of this story looks really, really bad for Mikey Williams, right? Because what happened allegedly is that Mikey Williams shot a gun at a car that had 5 people, including minors, in it. Right? That is what is being described as the incident. So that looks really, really bad, right? If that is, in a vacuum. So there are a lot of things that we have to be careful about about the implications that are being made, which is really tough, which is part of the reason why it's really tough that these kind of things have to play out on social media, because there are a lot of jumping to conclusions, and that's just a dangerous game to play with a guy who, probably his basketball future is riding on how this plays out. Because if he's found that, if and there's certainly an argument that shooting at a car as it's driving away, there's never a situation. There are very, very, very few situations where that's a legitimate response, but and it's probably likely that this wasn't one of them. But still, if this ends up on the really bad end of the spectrum, then Mikey Williams' basketball future is probably changed forever. And a guy who has kind of been touted as an NBA quality player since he was 16 years old, now not totally sure what his basketball future looks like.
Yeah. I don't really have too much to add. We need more information and to see how this all. I think I saw that he's appearing in court on Thursday, if I read that correctly somewhere.
I do think it's soon. I don't remember if I saw a date specifically, but I do think it's soon.
Yeah, so obviously, we got to wait and see how this plays out, because you're right. If one of the lessons that got reinforced this college basketball season is that whether you're facing charges or not matters, and this is not the most important conversation to have, but it's worth bringing up. Whether you're facing charges or not significantly impacts your ability to be employed / participate in college basketball.
It's a good point. So it's something that we'll certainly have to take into account, and for sure.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't look good for the reasons you laid out. But you think Brandon Miller, you think Chris Beard, right? Mm-hmm. Everything changed with Chris Beard. Chris Beard suddenly became employable again once the charges got dropped.
Yeah.
And this is obviously a very different situation. So it's going to be interesting to see how Memphis handles this as well. They're basically saying nothing other than we know it happened.
We're monitoring the situation.
Yeah, which is probably the smart thing to do.
And probably the responsible thing to do. Mm-hmm. At this point, it's different from. I think it's not quite they're not in the same situation that Alabama is in, at least not yet. I suppose they could be. We could get to that point. and maybe not quite, if considering that nobody died in the incident, but still, I think like it would be jumping to conclusions for Memphis one way or the other right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure they know more than they're telling us, but that's also their prerogative to make decisions publicly as information becomes public.
Yeah, and even at that point, I still would argue there's a major difference in terms of what they know.
Mm-hmm.
Right, this was something that was independent of the school, whereas
on the other side of the country,
yes, Alabama had information immediately and also didn't even put out the kind of statement that Memphis put out, saying, in terms of Jaden Bradley and Brandon Miller, right?
Right.
Didn't even give the full, we are aware that all of these players were at least somehow connected to this, were present when this occurred.
Yeah.
So Memphis is already even a little bit ahead in that aspect. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. I don't feel anywhere near as strongly that Memphis needs to be super proactive and super transparent with this, because that's and it's not fair to Mikey Williams either, right? He has a right to let the legal process play out, and we'll see what the kind of the legal case his team builds actually ends up being, and what kind of approach they take. Yeah, just thankfully nobody got hurt. Mm-hmm. It's another very sad story that could have serious consequences for one of those names that you just were always kind of had in line as one of the next big things in the sport.
To kind of put a bow on this here, do you think Mikey Williams will ever play a minute of basketball with Memphis on his chest?
If I had to guess now, qualifying it with Memphis, I would say no.
I will probably lean in that direction. Yeah.
I don't see this getting resolved quickly to the point where he's a member of that team next season, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think, like, I find it hard to believe. Like, I would be surprised if we get to like hearings and any further investigations, and we find out that Mikey Williams wasn't the one who shot the gun, which is the most likely outcome. The most likely outcome for me to lean towards him playing,
where it just kind of all goes away.
Right. Yeah. I just find it hard to believe that in the middle of April or early April, end of March, I just find it hard to believe that a recruit can shoot a gun at a car and then 6 months later will be playing college basketball. I just find that a little hard to believe. More so about, his just the optics of it than whether or not what the sequence of events that led up to him actually, firing a weapon. So, but we'll see. We'll continue to monitor it, and if there are things that come up that we feel like we need to touch on, we certainly will.
What I could see is a sort of time heals all wounds situation, potentially, depending on, again, right, this is a felony charge. Mm-hmm. Big deal.
Very much so.
If somehow this ends up looking much better for Mikey Williams, even if it doesn't all go away, what I could see is a potentially, if he was interested, ending up later down the road at a different school. Which
I could see that as well.
Now, the probabilities of that, if he's also able to enter the NBA draft, then also, do NBA teams want him? There are so many questions right now. Yeah, I don't see him suiting up for Memphis, though, if you're going to make me choose one or the other.
I'm sorry to put you in that position. I had to, I had no choice.
Yeah, I mean, from a practical standpoint, that's the college basketball question. So
certainly not the most important one, but I think one for the context of this year podcast, one Absolutely. That's at least worth exploring. Shall we go portaling?
Well, let's do it.
Okay, so I've got a few things here. You say you have a collection of just thoughts and tidbits and things you'd like to get to. So, do you have more than that? Do you have like a dozen little trinkets, or
More
is
or
it
less.
more? Okay, so I'll let you go. And I'm guessing I have a couple things here that are I have a couple team specific things and then a kind of wide arching thing. So I'm guessing we will overlap. So I'll let you go first and just kind of jump in where I may.
Yeah, I've got a few teams I want to talk about and then just a couple developments. And we're going to do this in pieces. So this is part 1. So I'm focusing on the people who have already committed, because then we're going to get to part 2. We got plenty of time to break this all down as more people commit.
Sure.
The first thing that stood out to me so far is what LSU has done. They're my big early winner in the sense of team that needed to improve its roster the most, not replenish, but actually get better from last season and the progress they have made towards that. Jalen Cook comes back after a really good stint at Tulane. Now, this is the one big thing I do have. Jalen Cook is already transferred. He transferred from LSU to Tulane, and now he's transferring back. Are these guys just going to get a second free transfer? Because there are multiple of them. So it seems to be determined whether he can play this season. The cynic in me just assumes if he's transferring again, he's going to be able to play somehow, some way. Maybe that's just me being too cynical, but when it comes to the transfer portal, I have a hard time being anything other than cynical.
Yeah.
So that is my big kind of overarching question is, are there guys who are actually going to sit out that have already used their one free transfer? We'll wait and see. But, right, one of the top players in the portal, LSU gets him back. Then you go add Jordan Wright, who was essentially 10.5 and 5 at Vanderbilt.
Mm-hmm.
And you bring in Will Baker from Nevada, a kind of versatile big who can stretch the floor. Maybe not the best rim protector in the world, but gives you some kind of offensive flexibility, a little bit of a different look offensively, skill, size to fill this big hole that you needed to figure out what you're going to do in the front court. Again, right, this is a team that was not good last season. Those are 3 major pickups, assuming Cook plays, that for a program that was just, had a lot of work to do to get back to where they were under Will Wade. Really, really nice progress from LSU. It's a really good sign that they can continue to win these kind of recruiting battles. And again, in the transfer portal world, it doesn't take much to turn your program around. Mm-hmm. And LSU are on the right path with those 3 guys. That was one of the first things that stood out to me.
Yeah, I was gonna save this point for the end of the podcast, but it's kind of just gonna be one that is gonna whittle its way through everything. So I'm just gonna bring it up now, and it includes LSU, and it's just when you look at the rankings, like the 247 Sports rankings of like transfers only, like not incoming classes, no recruits involved. When you just look at the transfer rankings on 247 Sports, what you see is a reinforcement of this idea of it just doesn't take that long to turn your program around now. In the top 11 of the 247 Sports rankings for transfers only, and granted, there are a lot of guys that haven't transferred yet, so these will change a little bit, but still, Georgetown is number 5. 7-25, 219th at KenPom, did not make the NCAA tournament, and it could get better because Hunter Dickinson is not transferred, has not announced where he's going to play college basketball next year, and Georgetown is on that list.
Yep.
Number 6, West Virginia, 19 and 15, 19th at KenPom. They did make the tournament, but I'm sure we'll talk about them here momentarily because they've also had a very, very nice portal so far. Florida, number 7, 16 and 17, 74th at KenPom, no tournament. Michigan, number 8, 18 and 16. That number 8 in the portal rankings, 18 and 16, 44th at KenPom, no tournament. LSU number 9, 14 and 19, 151st at KenPom, no tournament. And then the last team on my list where I stopped here because I'm getting my point across. Nebraska, number 11, 16-16, 94th at KenPom, no tournament. So it is just not. I need a few years is just becoming less and less of an excuse for coaches, and for coaches that I'm sure, generally speaking, that coaches don't love how the transfer portal works now. That's another reason why, if I was a coach, that would probably be the highest thing on my list. Like, forget the everybody leaves kind of thing. Like, you just don't have, like, your leash isn't nearly as long as it used to be, right? It used to be, all right, let's take a look, like 4 years, like, and instead of you being like, there's starting to be rumblings in year 4, like if you aren't good by year 4, you're like not going to make it to year 5, like ever. And this idea of just being able to turn your program around quickly. Now, granted, there are plenty of guys that haven't transferred yet. I haven't looked super deeply into all of those classes, so I'm not saying that all of those teams will now be top 25 teams necessarily. But my point being is that the transfer portal has enabled programs to turn things around and get high quality players really fast, and it doesn't really seem to matter how you did the previous season. Just doesn't seem to play that big of a factor into it. And you see it again with at least these early portal rankings, with still a good amount of guys still waiting to commit.
And for some of those teams in particular, I'm thinking Florida, LSU, Nebraska. There are spots and there's playing time, right? Which is one of the ways that you sell players. Same thing Kansas State did. We don't have a team. Mm-hmm. You come here, you're going to get to play because we don't have players. Now, it's not exactly the same because, those teams aren't making coaching changes this season. But, right, if you're looking to and a lot of these guys going to these programs are mid-major guys. Right.
Yeah.
You're looking for an opportunity to play at the highest level and to set yourself up for a professional career. Why not go play for an analytically driven Todd Golden at Florida when you know that they need help? LSU is still kind of trying to get back on track. You know what kind of resources, what kind of potential that program has. Why not go play? There is a. Now, if you're Hunter Dickinson, it's a different conversation because Kansas is coming after you. I was talking with my dad and stepmom about this weekend. This idea of if he wants to go win a national championship, he's going to Kansas. Right. Most guys in the portal aren't thinking that way. He has that ability because of what he's accomplished at Michigan.
Yep.
Most of them are looking for an opportunity to go play at a higher level and to prove themselves. And Nebraska, LSU, Florida are going to give you those kind of opportunities where if you went to just pick a random team out there. I mean, we'll stick with Kansas, right? You're not going to get that same kind of opportunity. Just ask our boy Joseph Yesufu,
And like, this is also a list of programs that have deep pockets. That's the other thing.
Yep, like, absolutely.
These are 6 programs. One of these programs is a Georgetown team that just that's just a program that is going to have the financial backing to put money in the pockets of players that want to come play for them, or that might come play for them. And then it's West Virginia, Florida, Michigan, LSU, and Nebraska. Those are 5 schools that their football program has been very generous to the depth of their pockets, right? And that's also something that you're just not going to see a ton of kind of Cinderella transfer ranking teams, right? I mean, and there are some other teams up here that had good seasons that I like. Cal is 10th right now with 2 commits, one of them being a 4-star transfer. But Cal is another team that, because of their place in, as a Pac-12 team, they're going to have some, and their location is also helpful. Berkeley, I've heard, is pretty nice. But also some other things to keep in mind. But that was kind of, I figured it was going to come up several times, so I thought I'd just bring it up now about the things we're starting to learn about the transfer portal year over year, kind of fitting the narrative we've seen the last couple seasons.
Yeah, let's talk about West Virginia real quick then, since they were kind of. I have a different section of teams I want to talk about next.
Okay.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting.
Very.
All right. Jesse Edwards, really good get in terms of just kind of, I mean, you know exactly what you're going to get from him. Interior presence, rebounding. He can score a little bit. He's not going to carry an offense, but he can, right, super efficient, knows how to get the ball in the basket and contribute on both ends of the floor. And then Kirk Rissa. There's a whole list of them, and I'm saving those guys for the end. I have no idea how this is going to go, but I'm fascinated. He's one of those guys. Him and Bob, and just the idea of him and Bob Huggins too. They are
doesn't totally compute.
Yeah, not exactly similar personalities.
No.
I am very excited to see how this plays out.
But at the same time, it's like, hey, if Kirk Rissa wants to come play for you, you're probably going to let Kirk Rissa come play for you, right? Mm-hmm. And especially because Kirk Rissa is somewhat polarizing. Maybe it's just because he wears a headband, but certainly a guy that I think West Virginia last year kind of hit a ceiling of talent. Mm-hmm. That like, I mean, 19. The metrics loved West Virginia last year. They still only went 19-15, but at some point, right, like their team just wasn't talented enough to really compete for a Big 12 title last year. They were a team that nobody wanted to play, but when you can get some talent like Jesse Edwards, who had a really, really, really productive season at Syracuse, and a guy like Kirk Rissa, like those are the type of things that can, that's a swing you're willing to take to see if you can raise the floor of your talent on your roster.
And from Chris's perspective, I have to imagine this is part of the decision for him entering the portal and transferring. He's never going to get that kind of responsibility at Arizona.
Probably not.
Right. The team, there's too much around him. And there's a good chance Ryan Nembhard also would have been is going to be on that team next season because of his connections to Tommy Lloyd. We'll see if that ends up happening. But he is going to have a role that is much larger than anything he would have had at Arizona. And so, to me, that's how I'm rationalizing, and maybe it's something else. I would have to assume it's that let's see what I can really do. Mm-hmm. I've proven I can play at the highest level, so I'm going to stay high major. But what else can I get? What kind of expanded role can I get? And to your point, this is a team has a very good foundation, a very good coach, looking for how do we take that next step and not just be competitive in the Big 12, but get to being in the top half of the Big 12. Mm-hmm. Because that is no easy task, and welcome Houston. Right. So, yeah, that is how it makes sense from a fit standpoint, from a personality standpoint. We're gonna have to see how this goes.
And it's and like I feel like Kirk Rissa is the type of player that I feel like if you can't find a way to make Kirk Rissa fit into what you do on the floor, you're probably just doing some things wrong.
Yeah,
but it's also not the archetype of player that has a ton of success at West Virginia, right? Like there are some, like I said, it just doesn't compute in some ways, but it's especially undeniable that Chris is pretty talented.
Yeah. And you just, what Eric Stevenson went through last season.
Right. Totally.
He and Bob Huggins had their, I don't know.
Differences?
Yeah. Maybe that's how we'll put it. It's not like this is unprecedented or that Bob Huggins just kind of lets players do what they want.
Right.
So maybe there's a perfect plan in place, and this is what Chris is looking for, and it's going to work perfectly. I'm looking forward to it. It's another storyline in the Big 12, and I'm always here for that.
100%. Where do you want to go next?
Let's stay in the Big 12 and talk about the two teams that are kind of connected that are on the other end of the spectrum of national title contenders, starting with Houston.
Okay.
I'm very interested by this Houston offseason. So they lose their guards, right? Tremont Mark transfers. We'll get to him in a minute. And Marcus Sasser is gone. So they need to replace these guys. So they go land Damian Dunn from Temple and LJ Crowder from Baylor. Which, in theory, you combine that with what they had on the bench that didn't get to play much last season and what they're bringing back, they look awfully good on paper. No surprise. Mm-hmm. What I'm curious about is the LJ Cryer part of this. Because it seems to me he is going to be in about the exact same position he was last season. He's playing alongside a small guard who is going to be the primary ball handler. Which makes them vulnerable defensively. Now, Jamal Shead is a very good defender for his size. And this is Houston, so they have a way to compensate defensively in a way Baylor didn't last season. I'm just curious about how he's going to fit and what his role is going to be. Because I don't see him being there's no way they're taking the ball out of Jamal Shead's hands for LJ Cryer. With all due respect to LJ Cryer, right? Marcus Sasser, that's a different conversation. But if I'm Kelvin Sampson, I want the ball in Jamal Shead's hands. I'm curious about this and what it's actually going to look like with those two guys, and whether there are going to be some defensive concerns playing both of them when LJ Cryer is coming from a team that, in large part because their guards weren't good enough defensively and weren't big enough, had a lot of defensive shortcomings coming to the best defensive program in the country.
My wonderings to your wonderings would be the following. One, I think maybe LJ was trying to get out of a situation where the coach there just had his feelings about him and they weren't going to change, right? Maybe it's
sure.
Maybe if nothing else, he has a chance to prove to Kelvin Sampson that he can be an offensive choice that's equal to Jamal Shead. And
to be clear, to me, those are two different things in terms of primary ball handler and offensive option. He's 100% a better scorer than Jamal Shead. That I'm not concerned about that part of it. I'm just in terms of a role, I don't see him, if you're thinking about transitioning to the NBA, being able to display your skills as a point guard in particular. That's the part I have a question about. Oh, he's going to score just fine. From a needing to replace Marcus Sasser's points, this makes all the sense in the world. I'm looking at more from an LJ Cryer development standpoint. Does that make sense? Sure.
I also would just not be surprised if he's not that concerned about it. I think if he develops as a point guard but only scores 9 points a game next year, nobody in the NBA is going to care.
True.
You just have to whether NBA scouts are ready to admit it or not. If you're going to be a score force guard in the NBA, which is what LJ Cryer would be if he carves out a spot for himself in the league, then we got to start with you putting up points and start with you also getting a chance to do it in the tournament, deep into it. And those two things combined, it looks like there will be points for him to be had. And Houston looks like they're laying the foundation to be a top 10 team again and be a team that has aspirations of winning a national championship.
Yeah. And there is absolutely a hole that need to be filled. And if you're looking at guys to fill it, he's up at the top of that list, especially guys in the transfer portal. So they got two really, really good scorers to kind of back up this defensive foundation they have. It's going to be interesting to see how this all kind of plays out. That was just I was very curious to see where he was going to go. And so it makes me wonder about what the thought process was. Not in a judgmental way, but just what exactly was he looking for in the portal?
Can we move to the team that one of those Houston guards transferred to?
Yeah,
can we talk about Houston?
Next.
Can we talk about? Not Houston. About Arkansas.
Yeah.
Arkansas. They're doing it again. Here they are. They're active in the portal again. They already have. They are the number 1 ranked transfer class according to 247 Sports at this point. At least I think they are. I had a tab here and it went away. Great podcasting here. I had a tab, it went away, but I'm pretty sure that it's them in Indiana that are there at the top right now. Anyways, and it could get better, right? I mean, we're looking at a class that already includes Jeremiah Davenport from Cincinnati, Tremont Mark from Arkansas, Keon Minifield from Washington, and our boy from Butler. Look at this. Caleb Battle on his way from Temple. Caleb, a guy who went to Temple and had certainly got to do some more of the things that it looks like he would be good at. And now he's at Arkansas. And Tyler Perry could be on his way to the North Texas guard, could be on his way to Arkansas as well. He has not committed yet, but he's doing this thing where he keeps taking pictures on his visits and then posting them to Twitter and then putting hashtag not committed, which I think is just so mean. Like if I was a Florida fan and I'm scrolling through Twitter and I see Tyler Perry wearing a Florida jersey, I'm jumping to conclusions immediately. But then you scroll through his timeline and he's got pictures with Arkansas, but he has been to Arkansas and is at least considering them enough to take pictures and then post them on Twitter to get a reaction. So it could get better. The Must Bus is gassed up and aplenty as it has been every offseason recently. And Arkansas is reloading once again.
Yeah. Whether they get him or not, Muss is going to find somebody.
Yep. Oh, I'm sure there are more. There will be more.
He's got 15 backups in the portal ready to go. I am sure if one of them doesn't work out. Yeah. No surprise here. And that's why I wanted to distinguish between the improving and the reloading. And, they're still waiting to kind of figure out Devo Davis, what that's going to look like in terms of his NBA future and whether he's coming back. Tremont Mark, to me, might be I'm trying to figure out how I want to phrase this. Maybe the kind of under the radar transfer that has the biggest impact this season. Because he's coming from a team that was just not designed to let him score 18 points. Right? Because they all scored 12. And he was certainly part of that. He is awfully impressive, though. And if RC4 can do what he did last season, imagine what a guy with Tremont Mark's resume can do. For a team that needs guards, that needs a scoring punch to make up for all the guys they lost after last season. I am a huge fan of that move. You mentioned Menifield. 10-3, 3-1 as a freshman at Washington. Maybe he's not a huge difference maker right away, but he's also a guy that you've got a bunch of eligibility left and will just continue to get better. And then, you've got the Caleb Battle part of this. Again, Caleb Battle's already transferred. Does he have to sit out? Who knows? Mm-hmm. And there has been some concerns throughout his career. But if this works and if he's eligible and that guy is kind of your, role player, sixth man.
Seventh option.
Right. Your extra scoring option. Yeah. My goodness, that's terrifying. Mm-hmm. So I will need to see it actually work and see him take the field take the court this season. But yeah, right. That's kind of the other guy in this transfer recruiting class so far, which tells you just how much work the Must Bus is doing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would be curious to hear Musselman talk about the Caleb Battle acquisition, to use a term that should never be used at the college level, but I'm going to use it anyways. Because we watched Caleb Battle play for a year at Butler, and he, it's not like he's dealt with, he wasn't good at Butler and he transferred, and then he was injured at Temple for 2 straight years. He played 18 games across 2 years for Temple before last year, where he played in 27 games, started 8 of them, scored a bunch of points, right? 18 points a game. 41, 35, 90 splits there. So clearly a guy who can score the basketball, but also a guy that still didn't become a completely bona fide starter at Temple and that's not what he would be at Arkansas anyways. But I am just I'm curious, like, because I'm sure, like, I would love to hear what Eric Musselman kind of envisions for Caleb at Arkansas, because it's probably not quite as extensive as what Caleb imagines for Caleb at Arkansas. I'm just that's one of those moves that I find really interesting, because it's also not a move that I would expect to really further his stock as a player at the next level. Like, I just don't think he'll have enough room to do that. So it's another one kind of that fits in the LJ Cryer category of would just love to know the no filter reasons why that was the decision that they made. Because Caleb Battle could have been like a guy that was fighting like first team all AAC, like kind of scorer next year if he's, if you're playing 32 minutes a game next year for Temple, and in theory his efficiencies go up, his scoring numbers go up. Like, there are multiple ways to get recognition, and we'll see if it works out at Arkansas.
Yeah, and there was a coaching change in Temple, so maybe that's part of this.
Sure.
And I think at one point that used to be a reason why you could transfer without penalty, right?
Which is probably why he won't have to sit out.
And I'm assuming, again,
because according to 247 Sports, his eligibility is immediate.
Okay. Does it say that about Jalen Cook too? I'm curious.
It did.
Okay. I gotta do some more looking into that then. Yeah, I'm to the point where I'm just not even going to pretend like I understand how this stuff works. We're just gonna have to see. And you would assume if they've got that somebody's given them some kind of positive feedback if they transferred a second time. So
right at this point, I'm just assuming that everyone's going to find a way to be immediately eligible.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, the word that comes to mind for me in terms of what Musk would say is upside, right? He has a scoring ability you can't teach. If you only need him to do that, you're in really good shape, because maybe he's not going to do the other stuff for you, but they got other guys to do that.
Yep,
so
certainly.
Those were the teams that I wanted to highlight, kind of having strong starts to the portal.
I'm going to keep it rolling then. I want to talk about Indiana for a second.
Yeah, I had one of Indiana's transfers on this list of players I want to talk about. Yep.
The first thing I want to say is I should have seen this coming, right? Like, that at some point Indiana was going to be a place, like, if they had a little bit of success, like, that would be a place that we're probably that they were going to move into, and that was going to be kind of the next step in upping, going from the talent kind of dropping off after Trace Jackson Davis and Jalen Hood-Schifino into, okay, now we've got 4 or 5 guys that are like really, really talented college basketball players, and we're not depending as much on the Jordan Geronimos and Tamar Bateses of the world, and kind of looking at Indiana's peak as those guys being really good, because that's just not a peak that, I mean, Indiana fans can go to bat for those 2 guys if they'd like to, but like, they were way more frustrated with Tamar Bates on more occasions than they were thrilled by his play. So it makes all the sense in the world to me that Indiana is, at least early in this process, at the top of these rankings, that they were able to land a guy like Kel'el Ware, because when you have a guy like Mike Woodson and you have the history of Indiana and the pockets of Indiana and the support that you're going to have for that basketball program, it's easy to see why guys would want to come there. They were just kind of missing the hot commodity aspect of it, and the sexy destination of that's a program that's playing well right now, and the direction that Woodson has that program going, it makes a lot of sense that they're now a place that some of the best transfers in the country are considering playing for.
And it's just so perfect that Kel'el Ware is the guy headed to IU, because I just see so many similarities between the two. in terms of, and I was talking about this at the beginning of last season after watching some of his highlights. It is so easy to talk yourself into this guy. He's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went to Oregon and he couldn't really get on the floor. Which is kind of you can look at that IU roster last season and tell yourself it's the best in the Big Ten with all these guys coming back. And you and I both said that doesn't mean it comes to fruition and they just jump everybody. And we were right.
Yeah.
Now it was somewhere in the middle because they had a very good season and obviously made an important step in, like you said, establishing Indiana as a factor at the top of the Big Ten again and kind of getting Indiana back to where Indiana should be as a factor on the national stage. A team that can go knock off number one Purdue on multiple occasions, It can go win the biggest college basketball game on a given weekend kind of thing. What does Kel'el Ware become? There's a gaping hole there. He's, in theory, a perfect fit to go replace Trayce Jackson-Davis. He can even do some of those things and a little bit more. Now, what he doesn't have is the polished, post-game and just kind of feel that made Trayce Jackson-Davis so good.
And I think the idea is that maybe Malik Renew will be that guy alongside Kel'el Ware.
Right, and you can see how those two guys fit together. Exactly. Mm-hmm. It makes a lot of sense. You're also just assuming he becomes something that he's not at this point. Which is where I feel like this is just a fitting player to come to Indiana, because that was kind of the whole conversation of last season is I can see how this goes excellent.
Mm-hmm.
I need to actually see it happen, though, for me to tell you that's what it's going to end up being.
And there's a world in which, right, he only played 18 minutes a game. So when you go to his, Kel'el Ware's per 40 numbers look really, really good. His per 40 is 17, 10, and 3.5 blocks. I'm much more interested in trying to talk myself into, okay, if Kel'el Ware is going to get to play 29 minutes a game instead of 15, that's just a different conversation to me than Tamar Bates and basically the same amount of playing time is going to become twice as productive.
Sure. Now,
does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Now, my pushback to that is that wasn't a Donovan. I would argue that wasn't a Donovan Clingan situation or a Zach Edey situation where you go, well, no, duh. Once he's outside of those other guys, he's just going to continue to produce at that level.
Sure.
I expected him to kind of take that center job. Right. It was he didn't win the position battle kind of thing. He didn't earn more playing time. Now, they had other options at center.
Now, granted, it's not like it. It was in Folly Dante.
Right. Another position. Former five-star. Right.
Right.
Who, certainly had, maybe he wasn't everything that Oregon hoped he would be, but certainly was a productive college basketball player. Yeah. So there is part of that, which is where
13 and 8 is what Infali Dante averaged last year.
So you can, So you can talk yourself into saying, look, maybe it just, for whatever reason, didn't work perfectly. Dana Altman preferred these other guys, specifically Dante. So you give him that opportunity. He's going to run with it and be excellent. Certainly a logical thought process. It's just not as obvious to me, or just something you can assume the same way it would be as, Travion Williams is gone. Zach Edey's going to play 29 minutes a game. Zach Edey's going to average, 20 and 12.
Sure.
And then he obviously even exceeded that. But you just knew you knew that it wasn't a Zach Edey couldn't do it. It was we have another All-American caliber player right in front of him that is blocking his path. Same thing with Donovan Clingan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fair. There's of course some of that. 97% of transfers kind of fit into that bubble,
sure,
a little bit, but certainly because Indiana's recruiting class is not exactly knock your socks off this year. They don't have that. They don't have in the class of 2023 that Jalen Hood-Schifino type recruit. Their highest ranked recruit that's coming in as a freshman is a 6'1" guard from Ohio named Gabe Cupps. That's the 88th ranked player in this class at 247 Sports. So it's going to be important for, because when you they have another guy that's top 115 in Ja'Kai Newton, who's also a guard. So you bring in Peyton Sparks from Ball State, and you bring in Kella Ware from Oregon, and Peyton Sparks, a 6'9" guy, another big body. So certainly shoring up the front court with the moves, but it's not like those like that is very much a part of the foundation of next year rather than like the cherry on top or the icing of next year.
Right.
That there are plenty of holes and questions about Indiana's roster next season, and these transfers are going to be a big part of kind of filling it.
Right. This isn't just a maybe I have more opportunity. This is he is supposed to be a key piece to what this team is going to look like.
Yeah.
Which is a role he has not, a role he did not play at Oregon, which is basically my point. Yeah.
All right, we've officially knocked on all of the things that I wanted to knock on. What do you have left?
I've got two real quick things.
Let's do
Staying in the Big Ten, Ace Baldwin following Mike Rhodes to Penn State. Love it. Love it.
Locked in.
I don't really have too much else to say about it. Now, this would be even more interesting to me if Micah Shrewsbury was still there, just a Penn State becoming kind of the team with guards in the Big Ten.
Mm.
But
he's probably not there if Mike Shrewsbury is there.
Yeah, clearly he's a Mike Rhodes guy. Mm-hmm. So I am excited to see him at a higher level, in a spot where he's going to have so much responsibility, because he was really, really good for VCU. So that's going to be a fun Big Ten story. And then the final thing I wanted to talk about real quick is just, I'm calling it the wild cards.
Okay. Hit me. Give them all to me.
Or maybe I should have called it the wild guards.
Ooh, I'm in. That's good. I'm in. I'm locked in.
Going in kind of reverse order from least wild to most wild. I'm really curious about this Jaden Epps to Georgetown move. It's been a little while since he committed. Super, super high on him. He had a very promising season for Illinois. What does that next step look like under Ed Cooley at Georgetown? He's part of this. Yeah, you can rebuild it really quickly because he's going to be an impact player. How much does it matter if they don't get Hunter Dickinson? There's just some uncertainty in terms of whether. And I'm also bringing this up because at least the first three guys on this list, I'm not sure how much of a role they're going to play in the college basketball season, so I wanted to mention them now.
Okay, sure.
Because if wow, sorry, having all kinds of vocal difficulties here. Right, if Georgetown don't kind of get the transfers they need to really improve, you might not hear much from Jaden Epps. So I wanted to mention that now. In a similar vein, Brandon Murray's now at Ole Miss. Speaking of Georgetown, back in the SEC, super right. He was another one of those guys. Great freshman year at LSU, and then you just didn't really hear much about him because Georgetown was bad, and Ole Miss probably isn't going to be great either. So I wanted to mention that. Similar, Sky Clark, Louisville. Can he be part of turning that thing around? What does that even look like? It's a big get for Kenny Payne to get somebody of Sky Clark's caliber at this point, just with everything that's gone on there. And then, finally, the most wild of the wild cards. We got to talk about Caleb Love going to Michigan.
Dude, it's so good.
I mean, they need somebody to take shots. I get it. I'm not sure it's going to be all that helpful or impactful, but they need somebody to take shots.
I'm not a Caleb Love fan, so I it's just it's going to be wherever he goes, it's going to be the North Carolina effect. It's either going to be, if he's playing the best basketball he's played in his career for a 8-week stretch, they're going to go to the Final Four. And if he doesn't, which is basically his entire college basketball career, other than those 8 weeks where they went to the Final Four, then you're just going to be left kind of feeling like the team that he's on isn't as good as it could be, and just doesn't reach its potential as often as you'd like it to, because just the business of Caleb Love is that sometimes it's going to be really awesome and sometimes it's just not. And he's going to be the dude, and he's going to take a lot of shots, and it's going to be a volatile season, I think, for Michigan as a result. Or he's going to be the National Player of the Year.
Now, the difference is there's nobody he's taking those shots from. Right? There is no RJ Davis. There is no Armando Bacot. If Hunter Dickinson was still there, this is a different conversation. So how much can, if he's supposed to be the guy taking the shots, how much can he actually hurt your team?
I mean, it's a fair point, but it's still the point is still the same. Yes. Sometimes he's going to go 13 of 26, and sometimes he's going to go 6 of 26.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be a thing that occurs. You just don't know what you're going to get every single night. Yeah. I do, because I'm with you that fundamentally I'm not all that intrigued by the idea of adding Caleb Love to my team. If you're going to lay out a scenario, I guess this is my point. If you're going to lay out a scenario in which Caleb Love can have the greatest impact and makes the most sense, this is the kind of situation I would envision.
Okay.
Because what I don't want is him minimizing the impact that other players can have, because that's what happened to Armando Bacot. We've been on this all season.
Sure. Yep.
Because we are past the point where you can say, well, maybe Caleb Love figures it out. Maybe Caleb Love changes. No, Caleb Love is who Caleb Love is. Yeah. He's played way too much college basketball at this point.
Yep.
To assume something's going to be different. And if you're Michigan, a team in need of a good season, with some frustration from the fan base, with not all that much to get excited about in terms of the roster, he gives you something, right? Because he gives you the ability to win on any given night.
Yep.
I'm kind of getting to the point where, to me, it's a risk worth taking. Does it also limit? It simultaneously elevates and limits your ceiling, right? Which is a weird way to put it. Because
I think it's pretty accurate, though.
Yeah,
elevating and limiting. Let's get it on a t-shirt.
Simultaneously, he's a ceiling raiser and ceiling limiter, because right, he's going to frustrate you to no end at sometimes. Sometimes he's going to be the best player in the country, and it's all just going to kind of fluctuate. But if you're saying, where can Caleb Love kind of do the most good, help a team the most, fill a need the best, this is the kind of situation, because they need, I mean, Juwan Howard needs talent, they need experience, and Caleb Love, with all of the other things he's going to bring, is going to bring those two things as well.
Also worth mentioning that Namari Burnett will join him.
Yes.
In Ann Arbor.
That is going to be some kind of backcourt.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. All right, you got anything else?
No, that's all I had. Yeah, we're going to have to do, NBA, and we'll have to talk maybe next week, NBA draft decisions. We've got the deadline coming up. Of course, we will also be returning to visit the portal again with
multiple times.
Yeah, with all of the still uncommitted players.
Certainly. It's
just that weird time, and this always makes me laugh, where all of the players simultaneously, you get the trifecta, where they maintain their eligibility, enter the transfer portal, and declare for the NBA draft.
That's correct. That's correct. It's so
and you
good.
Just have no clue what that means.
It's so good. So good.
They're just,
and now they can have an agent and still,
right? Exactly.
It still be in, and
right. You just explore all your I could do anything I possibly want. I could return to the school I played for. I could enter I could transfer somewhere else. I could go to the NBA. I'm going to do it all, and then I'm going to make my decision. So we haven't gotten to that point yet. That's kind of the next step in this is, okay, now we know who's staying and who's going. Now those guys have to make decisions about where they're going to play, if they're the ones who are returning. And then we get a better feel for what next season's going to look like.
There you go. And we'll be back to talk about it. We'll do our best to tackle it. Here we go. We'll elevate and limit. Is that what you said? We'll elevate and limit. That's so good. On a t-shirt immediately. But yes, as as things continue to develop in the transfer portal, this was just kind of here's all the things we've been thinking about the last couple weeks.
Throw it
Let's
all
get them
together.
all on paper or an audio file, I suppose. But there will be plenty of time to return to the transfer portal as we get a better idea of what next season's college basketball rosters are going to look like. Please subscribe to the Jays for Days podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at Jays for Days Pod. Check out the YouTube, the Twitter, all of those fun things, and we'll be back next week. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Jays for Days podcast. I'm Josh. He's Josh, and we will see you